Welcome to the Outcast Intellectual Podcast. And no, I'm not going to talk like that the whole time. Hosted by Chris Isaac, because I don't
Chris Isaac.
because I don't want to disrespect myself by putting myself second, but I don't want to be a narcissist by going first. So it's Chris Isaac.
Right. KNI.
And the episode that totally went according to plan, because Zoom doesn't tell you need to upgrade your account in order to stream to Facebook, is about how Kung Fu Panda and everything else we end up talking about exposes the hypocrisy of good and evil. I'm not really trying to fall back into the transatlantic accent. It just keeps happening. So I know, Chris, I think you said you
Right.
haven't watched the movie before, right?
Yeah, I've watched movie a couple of times.
Oh,
Though
okay.
I think, yeah, most parts it was like back when I was like 7 years old.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, so for anybody who hasn't watched it, because I mean, obviously, this is not just for now, this is also for when we post the recording. Basically, the notion of it is, and yes, spoilers. Uh, I mean, everything we do is spoilers. Is there's this panda who works with his dad in a noodle shop, and he worships kung fu, and he wants to go and see on this day when they're going to be picking the dragon warrior, which is impressive, I guess. And this old ass turtle is the one who's going to pick who it's going to be, and he somehow ends up like exploding on a firework and landing in there, and the turtle's pointing to him, and like everybody's like flabbergasted. They don't know what's going on, and it's the kind of the typical thing where the master doesn't want him to the other master who's like a rat or something, or I don't know what animal he's supposed to be. It's not a gerbil, but one of those vermin, and he tries to get him to quit. Meanwhile, there's this old student who the master had originally wanted to become the dragon warrior, who was like, he's based on like a Bengal tiger. His name's Tai Lung, and found him as an
Right.
orphan and raised him when he saw his talent as a martial artist to be the dragon warrior. And then the turtle later on is like, no. And so Tai Lung goes ape shit, and I guess we'll have to decide at some point just how much we're going to swear on these, but I already said shit, so whatever. And I mean, I just
I
suppose,
think we could.
yeah, swearing is probably the least of our problems. And long story short, like he barges into the temple and the turtle knocks him out with his magical bullshit. And then he gets put in prison and is in prison up to the point of when the show actually starts or the movie starts.
Right.
The the master gerbil dude, whatever animal he is, for some reason specifically sends an animal, I think it's like a crane or something, to go and check to make sure that he's still in prison. And that's when Tai Long hears about it, that the dragon warrior person or whatever is going to be claimed, or maybe the turtle dies at some point. I forget the chronology of it. But basically, Tai Lung breaks out of prison and comes for the dragon scroll, which is what's supposed to give you the power of being a dragon warrior. And I think that's really the only background you need to at least start the conversation, because Tai Lung gets done wrong. And I know that like it's a kids movie, but the thing is that people do this a lot with all kinds of movies where they want this to be the bad guy, and so
Right.
they hold the responsibility of everything. Like they basically turn them into a Hitler, where it's like it's not the rest of Europe's fault that the war started. Like it has nothing to do with them. It's just evil Nazis. That's the only reason World War II happened, right? And so with Tai Lung, they basically say, oh yeah, like he's this evil Bengal leopard martial artist thing who's going to do whatever it takes to get the Dragon Scroll. But they never mention the fact that the master raised him from a baby to think about one
To think
thing:
about what thing. Yeah. To be the
be the
Dragon
fucking
Warrior.
dragon warrior. Doesn't teach him anything else besides how to kick ass and that he needs to become the dragon warrior. And then he's told, you're not going to become the Dragon Warrior. And they're like, oh, I wonder what he's going to do. Maybe he's going to do the other
Right.
thing.
Right. And
So,
there's that debate right there, right? Like when people, you know, people like him, let's say, doesn't get what they want,
mm,
and well, of course, goes evil. Where in fact, uh, well, he's trained his whole life, so it's basically understandable that he'd lash out to that degree, right?
mhm,
But still, people would all point fingers, and blame him for his misdoings. Where in fact, again, there's Shifu, right? Who raised him up to think otherwise, who raised him up to think that, hey, I deserve this. I've dedicated my whole life for this. And well, again, just like you said, now that you know he lashes out and he basically turns quote unquote evil,
mm.
right? That's when people again hate him for it, whereas in fact, again, it's not entirely his fault.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The thing about, for example, it being like his responsibility to make his decision after the fact, because that would be the first response, I guess, that one could give is that it's like, okay, he was raised to be this way, but he still had the choice of how to respond, which is true.
Yeah,
But even if one went fully in that direction, Shifu never has any responsibility for it. And they never
right.
suggested like, yeah, he feels bad that things didn't go well with him, but he doesn't accept that the only reason Tai Long ended up like that is literally because he raised him to be
He
like
raised him
that.
up to be like that. Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's like, do they both go to prison? No.
Mhm.
Does Shifu like try to go to prison throughout the years, like to like bring him back and say, "Oh, I was wrong" and such? No. He just chills in his temple with his new proteges and just says, "Yeah, yeah, Tai Lung, what an asshole." And that's honestly the approach most people end up taking because they just want the scapegoat or scape tiger in this case, I guess. And that was one thing that really bothered me. I watched it a few times, but the thing that bothered me the most about it is that they just never present anybody as having any sense of responsibility aside from Tai Long. It's like, no, he was beating people up. He's a bad tiger. It's like, dude, at least have a scene about it or something.
Right, right. But then you
So,
also need to, like, I guess, take into account that again it was entirely his decision to go
hmm.
evil, right? But
But
still,
is he
I
even
guess,
evil? Or is he just doing what
yeah,
he was
it's just
raised to do?
crazy to do. Yeah, actually, yeah, that is something that, you know an interesting topic to go about. Like, how people naturally, just because of a common belief, they see it as normal, or just because of, like, let's say it's something that they've been, like, uh indoctrinated to behave,
Hmm.
they think it's normal, right? And I guess what I'm trying to say is that because Tai Long is, well, again, trained to be, uh a fighter or a martial artist and all that
Since
stuff. It's like,
infancy.
for since infancy, of course, like, uh it's hard to really, like, switch the script, or flip the script rather,
Hmm.
and just let him, like, sit down and, be a good tiger, so to say.
And he never gets the chance either. That's the thing, is that not only is he only taught to fight from the beginning, all he knows is training to become a warrior and everything like that. But Shifu had also told him, like, raised him specifically to become that dragon warrior,
Right.
right? So it's not only is that the case that's all he knows, but not he was also raised specifically for the one purpose. It's not like he was just raised to be a martial artist and to be the dragon warrior was the highest achievement. It was, but no, you're going to be the dragon warrior, and then he's not the dragon warrior, and they don't really say what age he was at that time, but because I don't think they really give. I mean, it was before. Shifu got all the other animals, I think, like tigress and such.
Right.
So it must have been, he would have had to have been like a teenager or something like that. Like, I mean, I know we're talking about animals, but like in his life, in his life cycle, he must have been a teenager when that happened. So it's like, if every teenager was judged for acting like stupidly, the one
Right.
time that they did it, like that, we would have, everybody would be in prison. So that was the first thing that occurred to me that I thought was nonsense the whole time, because then Poe comes in and Shifu's doing everything he can to get Poe the panda to leave, just give up. And it's only after I think it was Uguay, the turtle dies, the Grandmaster dies, that he starts to turn around. And I think it's also because he knows that Tai Long escaped and he needs Poe because
Each oh yeah.
the other animals try and can't beat him. Um, so the moral that I'm going for here, the point is that uh, Shifu turns a new leaf and realizes that he was coming from the wrong place when he was training Tai Long, and comes at it differently with Poe and trains them and stuff. And eventually, Tai Long does make it to the temple. But even then, Shifu was like, I wonder if maybe I should take some sense of responsibility for the fact that like I indoctrinated him to be like this, because now he has changed to understand that where he was coming from before was wrong, but still he doesn't think about that. And this isn't with the backdrop of like super like at peace and like self-awareness and all this other stuff with kung fu, but still is like, no, Tai Lung's just a bad guy. And I guess to not harp on it too much, like that's largely my point, is that people go all Jedi mode with it and act like they're being these indifferent bastions of morality, but in reality, they're really just turning somebody else into their
There's
scapegoat and not willing to take responsibility for their own, aspect in there. And even then, sidebar, Tai Lung would not have lost to fucking Poe, who's trained for like 4 days in martial arts. I mean, granted, Tai Lung had been like in prison all that time, but I mean, he spent his whole life training that, and Poe can make up for that in 4 days or whatever it is. It's bullshit.
right. Right. Well, again, it just goes back to that concept uh where if you are, well, again, indoctrinated to think in a way, and all is of course build up to that moment that you think, or at least you've been taught to you deserve, right,
Mm-hmm.
is taken away from you, is crushed. And basically all because you have someone else who doesn't, well, grant you what you kind of deserve, right? Then again, it doesn't make sense that, again, everyone has to point fingers at Tai Lung. It just doesn't. Like, let's say, like, example in Japan, right? Old Japan.
Mm-hmm.
In after like the whole uh war, or the whole civil war they had, and they united the whole country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they've been like at war for centuries. First thing they did, or at least what they planned to do, was go and conquer Korea. Right?
That's my boys.
Exactly. I mean, like, it's not that, it's not that they had no other option. Of course they had, like, of course they could just, like, build up to other things, or like increase their economy, because they've been born and raised to be warriors, or at least to conquer other planes.
Mm-hmm.
That was basically what they ended up doing, even after uniting the whole country, right? So in that sense, just like Tai Lung, you can't just completely put the blame on him for something he's been taught to do his entire life, only to get like, robbed by someone else without any good explanation, right? Like you said, like this panda just flies and falls out of the sky, and then
You're the Dragon
apparently he
Warrior
was a dragon warrior, right?
because you're voiced by Jack Black, I guess. And the thing is that they put him straight into. I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, he's not just in prison. He's literally at the very bottom of the prison, like on his knees, with like chakra poles in his back, boulders on either side holding him down, and like all kinds of, it's like that's it. I mean, granted, you'd be dead if that was the case, but in this world, there's no rehabilitation. They're not like, So he really messed up, but we also raised him to be exactly like this. So yeah, he did wrong, and maybe we'll put him in a prison or something, but maybe we should try to just show him
Show
that,
him.
you
Yeah.
can be a badass and not have to. Well, the best thing about it is he is fighting everybody to get the dragon scroll, which, spoilers, it's revealed like 3/4 of the way through the movie. There's nothing on it. So after all this shit, even the thing that the turtle and Shifu were protecting, it wasn't a real thing. Like, I get it, like, oh, it's like a mirror thing. It's like, oh, you are your own power, great. But was it really worth making this
Yeah,
tiger?
exactly. Making Tiger, exactly, man.
So, and that's another thing, is that they built the whole value of the Dragon Warrior desirability in the scrolls or scroll when it doesn't matter. And so they get to use the wise old master sage thing as a cop out. Meanwhile, Tai Lung, does one wrong thing. It's like, oh no, fuck this guy. It's like, was it really worth protecting a mirror finish piece of paper?
Paper or
So
scroll.
so I guess to extrapolate that to outside sources is that it's not that Tai Lung had zero responsibility. I mean, it would be dumb to expect him to not react the way that he did. But even say that Tai Lung was in the wrong for what he did. Okay. But that still doesn't change the responsibility of the other parties, you know? And you see this in other movies in everyday life where it's like people, it's like only one party has to be right or wrong. And as long as you point out that this one party did wrong, it's like everybody else's wrongs don't matter because you've already found the bad guy, you know? And so that was another thing that
Right.
bothered me, is that like when Poe, I mean, they don't show it, but kills Tai Lung with the pinky explosion thing. Everybody's like, oh yeah, it's such a good thing. It's like, this is fucked up, you know? Because imagine if you were raised to want to do one thing, whatever it might be, and then you couldn't do it, and then you got like completely upset about it, and then that was your entire existence, and that's all you do, and that's all you know, and then you do that, and then some dude who's only been training for 4 days just beats you because the plot demands it, and then you die, and like it's a good thing. It's just so dumb to me, and people do that crap all the time, and it pisses me off.
Right. Right. Exactly. Uh, well, I guess plot armor realism aside, I guess they were just trying to like, you know, make it to a point where the way you approach things kind of like gets you different results, of course. Like I guess Tai Lung approached it in a way where, you know, he was desperate for it, I guess, where he got
Okay.
to a point where again he got mad with power. But still, I think it doesn't like justify the fact that again he was only doing it because that was what he was taught to do.
Right.
and throughout his entire life, that was what he was taught he deserved, right? That still makes sense.
And
And
even oh, go ahead.
like yeah, going back to Shifu, right? Why wasn't he like, at the very least, like taken out of the temple, or like why wasn't he like,
Even
not
felt
permitted
like
to
he should
teach?
be.
Yeah, or why didn't he feel like he should actually retire as a master because he's built such a monster and not have any, you know, methods to actually change him for the better,
Mhm.
and instead locked him up in like inside the deepest chambers of a mountain, guarded by, I guess, how many rhinos were those? Or were
Not
there
enough.
300? I think not
Not
enough.
enough is the answer.
Right. And again, like his entire life, like he just came from like training to be that great person that his master told him he was going to be, to exactly right after being that mountain.
Well, even just the fact that, like, if they're so wise and so knowledgeable and so understanding, why, when he started freaking out, Tai Lung, did they not just share that the power comes from you? That's it. You know what I mean? Because that's another thing is that, like, say that Tai Lung was doing things wrong. Say that Shifu did things wrong, but there's no consequences. Even freaking Uguay. But if they're so smart, particularly Uguay, since he's this old ass turtle, he's supposed to know everything. Instead of stopping him and showing him, like, the only reason Tai Lung had to be in prison rather than just being shown, like, look at how talented you are, look at all this skill that you've gotten. It's not about getting this scroll, which is just, it shows you anyway. It's just about like who you are. Oh, it's almost like they did that with Poe later on. You know what I mean? So it's like, again, Tai Long basically just has to suck it because these people didn't feel like doing it for him for the movie. And again, it is a kids movie, but the point is not to criticize the movie for doing it. It's more for just the notion that it's
Of
okay to
good
do that in
feel.
general,
Right.
you
Right.
know. But that happens all the time. Is that uh, people are pushed into situations where, yes, they could choose to do something else, but like realistically, there's no reason to expect that they would. And then they do it, and then they bear sole responsibility for it. But everybody else that pushed them into it, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're in the
Right.
corner, you don't have to explode out of the corner. But who put you in the corner in the first place? You know, and
Right.
they do that all the time. Good.
Right. Right. Yeah. So anyway, I guess the notion is that, again, the good and evil, how some people, even after, you know teaching this person or molding this person that way, they don't bear any responsibility. It's like, let's say if you abused your child, right? Very sensitive topic. Abused them, like basically taught him all the negative things there is, the negative traits a person could hold, and you expect him to be like all saint or like godly and stuff, right?
Right.
Or all innocent? Of course not. He's going to learn how to take that out, how to take out that anger or whatever, that abuse you give him on other more things, right? Other more negative things, to be exact. And of
Mhm.
course, again, it all boils down to choice. But just like anything else, if you're put under pressure, people will react differently. And in most cases, if you put them in that kind of like, negative exposure all the time, then of course that reaction would most likely be negative as well.
Right. If you push somebody
Right.
around, they have the choice to fight back or to walk away or whatever, but you're still
Right.
pushing them. Like, where's your
Right.
responsibility, you know? And that's the thing
Right.
is that
Right.
everybody says, oh, Tyler, like Tyler's responsible for his own choices, but then nobody else is responsible for theirs, you
Right.
know?
Exactly. Exactly. It's like say bullies, right? Even just bullies at some
Mhm.
point. People say that they're just bad people, or that they like uh the the pain that they deal with to other people, right?
Right.
But nobody like tries to like ask too, like why is he raised that way,
Or
where's
why
the
does he
responsibility to
feel?
pay, why does he feel that way, what does he feel the need to bully, right? And again, it goes down to what's happening inside, you know uh inside his home. Like, is he treated differently? Is there abuse? Is there some kind of like misunderstanding? You know, just like known a lot of people who react differently to some things just because of how they were raised back at home, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like, if you're someone who's not like used to getting affection from your parents because they just choose to show nothing, right? When you receive that affection from other people, it's going to be weird for you.
Yeah.
And what's even weirder is if you show it to other people, right? If you show that affection to other people, because you're like, I'm not taught to receive this, I'm not taught to give it,
Right. But
right?
you're going to be judged based on whether or not you do it based on general expectations. So, for
Exactly.
example, if you're raised in all of your relationships, like they're not really positive, but like the closest relationships you have, they're just like that. And then say that you manage to get away from that, like that negative influence is taken out of your life, or you get to move away from it. That's still all you've known. So it's not like a simple matter of like you go from being -1 to back to 0. You're still affected by that, and you still have the lack of context that comes from never getting the affection. So now, if you try to build relationships with other people, even if even if somehow you still have the desire to show the affection, which you may not because you have been raised to like you've grown up not even thinking that that should be given, you still
Exactly.
don't know how to get it. And yet at the same time, unless it's a very particular kind of person, the fact that you can't, don't know how to give that affection, they will judge you based on that, not on why you couldn't. But
No,
of
why you
course,
couldn't? Exactly.
then there's even the aspect of, I mean, should they give you the chance? Should they come down to give somebody the chance in that case? Like that's kind of like a branching path of responsibility. But either way, people are, people will always judge books by their cover because it's visual. The majority of our information is also visual. It's how we survive in nature, right? So
Right.
it's natural that we'll judge things by their covers and the state that they're in versus the state that they should reasonably be expected to be in,
Expected to be.
given their conditions.
Right,
But
exactly.
so, and that's the thing is that at the end of the day, there's people don't even care to try to give somebody a chance usually, particularly now when everything moves so quickly, and that's why, and it makes it even worse when we're talking about conditioning here, when the movies they're watching are teaching them to be that way too, because, and that's another reason why I think, for example, like anime and certain narrative styles can often be way better in terms of writing than more Western styles because Western styles are all about good, evil, right, wrong, you know, this way, that way. It's very binary in a lot of senses. Like it's either this or that, it's 0 or 1. Versus an anime where you often see this is why they're like this. And I mean, some of the most well-known anime heroes, they're one of the best things about them is that they look past just what somebody's
Just
doing
right.
and they try to find like why are you like this, what happened to you. And
Exactly.
um but if you're watching movies where it's just, oh, this is the bad guy, it's just his fault, no responsibility here, then that's what you're going to learn. And so on the one hand, people can say, Oh, it's like, well, it's just a kids movie. Come on, like that's what it's going to be. But the kids movie is the best time to not tell them things are this simple because they're not. Because what about when you're tied long? What about when you've been working all day and the customers treated you like shit and you come home and your partner was cheating on you? You know,
Right.
like, oh, well, the mature thing would be to walk away. It's like all you wanted to do was pass out in your bed and you came back to find that this other person that meant the world to you or whatever was betraying your trust. So it's like,
Right.
could they just leave and go to their parents' house? Maybe. But what are they going to do? They're going to shoot them, you know what I mean? Or beat them up or
Exactly.
something.
Yeah, that's why I mean at least in I think in by law, right? If you actually catch someone like sleeping with your partner, if you do end up shooting them, you're not liable for it.
Really?
Yeah. I think
Damn.
I think that actually came from the US Constitution or whatever US law that was. Cause like yeah, I didn't even know it was like that. But again, it just goes to show how, your emotions, it's so easy to say that you should act this way, but if you're put into that situation, if you're put into that corner, right, people will act differently. People won't act the way most people would think they'd act, right? Which
Right.
is again prim and proper. Again, you don't expect to be, you don't expect yourself to be calm if you saw that kind of sight in front of you, right? And
Right.
of course, added to the fact that you were dealing with crappy customers or customers who can't even like take no or take a simple hey, we don't have that as an answer,
Mm-hmm.
right?
When it's not even
So
your fault because you're the cashier.
yeah, exactly.
But
Right.
that's how people end up being. And I think that also has a lot to do with why people, like on the one hand, people can just be dumb, but on the other, they're encouraged to look at things in a black and white sense. And then again, ironically, given that they're taught to be that way, after the fact, they're just expected to have an open mind. So it comes full circle because even the people who were judging are ultimately only doing that because of what they've been consuming, what they understand. And I don't know, it's just a crazy cycle, I guess. And
Yeah,
Thailand got done wrong.
I think good and evil should really be like understanding both parties, right?
Mm.
Understanding why people are bad, understanding why people are good too, right? Like,
Well, even
that's why when you're they say that the most mature thing to do if you do come across these kind of people is not be mad at them but to understand them, right? Just to understand them why they're like that, because again there's a lot of like different elements that contribute to why they act in a certain way, and to not put any kind of blame or pin any kind of blame on those other elements, right, would just be unfair for them or unfair to them for that
mm,
matter.
yeah, and I guess it really does get down to the notion of responsibility because I mean that's really what it comes down to if you think about it. And of course, the the world can give you all kinds of feedback, and then you can be different anyway in spite of that. Uh, I've done it. I know a number of other people. I mean, generally, the people who are most successful and who are most revered are revered not just because of their natural talent, but because they succeeded despite the odds.
Right.
So it creates like a weird situation where people are expected to do what is like average, what is normal, what is expected of them.
Right.
But then on the other hand, if they do what's not expected, but in a certain way, they're better, in society's eyes. So society basically sets this expectation like, yes, you should be normal until you're not, until you succeed, and then you're awesome. So literally just like that whole balance of things just shows how wacky it is to begin with.
Exactly, man. I don't know what I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, I guess it just goes to show that again, good and evil isn't just black and white.
Yeah. Or
You know,
if good and evil are even a thing to begin with, or if it's just our experience of it.
our experience of it. Yeah.
Because the thing for me is that the problem that a lot of people get into is, and we know this as marketers, that people, they buy with emotion and justify, not with logic. I don't know why people keep saying logic. It's just reasoning, because logic is built on a logical system. Everything that is logical is valid. So 0 equals 0. Therefore, and 1 does not equal 0. Therefore, 0 does not equal 1. You know what I mean? It has to have defined given variables, whatever you want to say. But we don't work like that. Like the very notion of the fact that, like, I don't even see you right now. I see the light coming from my screen going into the photoreceptors in my eyes. So the very way that we perceive everything going on around us is proof of why we don't use logic. We can only ever use reasoning. But when people are using their emotions, or they're feeling a certain way and then they justify it with their reasoning, they just create this like impassable situation where there's, it's not about the point, it's not about the truth, it's just about how they feel. And it's just crazy to me that we focus so much on the why of things. But again, as marketers, we understand that like emotion has to come first. And I wonder if the reason why you have these scapegoats like Tai Lung in real life, where they're not just trying to give you like an entertaining movie, is because people know that it's not that simple. And that's why they have to put it on the other party, because if it's not that simple and they accept it, that means they did something wrong too. And we all know how hard of a time most people have admitting that they did anything wrong. You know,
Right. Right.
this is episode 1. But essentially the notion is going to be how there's always an excuse you can make. And no one's in such negative circumstances that it takes away their choice. So actually, that's honestly the perfect follow-up for this, because now we get to explore the other end of the same
Other
kind
end
of
of it.
coin.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yes, that is for next time. Same bat time, same bat channel. This was Chris
Right.
Isaac. Goodbye, sports.
Bye.